Yeah, so really the question kind of we're going to explore over the next 15, 20 minutes or so before we have a discussion is, given the kind of complexity of the world that we're in, what kind of leadership is needed? So how do we need to be able to be thinking about the world that we're in? And how do we need to be able to design interventions as leaders that will be as effective as possible in this kind of world? So, you know, just to summarize, this came out of New Scientist originally. It was actually also the only graphic in one of Dan Brown's books. All of these different issues that have been kind of brewing on the back burner for a while are all accelerating and influencing each other. So the complexity and the speed of change has increased massively over the last 20 years or so, because all these issues are so interlocked. So when something changes in one thing, it changes in another, and the feedback loops keep kind of influencing each other as the complexity increases, essentially. So we've got all this complexity going on, all these issues that we're having to deal with. And we're in a certain moment in change that is not a simple linear change moment. So as you can see, these are different major change moments that we've had in the history of humanity over time, from agrarian societies to agricultural to feudal, industrial, and then post-industrial. And what marks these, as you see, these changes are these non-linear leaps. So a big jump happens in these change moments. And we're in another one of these kind of change moments where basically the old world breaks down. And then we look for ways to be able to try and find a future that meets the new challenges that we're facing. But it's not a kind of change that you can plan your way towards, because it's emergent, which means that at some point it just pops and we're there, but you can't predict what it's going to look like or when it's going to happen. So that means the way one leads ourselves and our organizations through these kind of change moments is quite different to the way one might lead an organization in a stable kind of phase of development, let's say. So just to zoom in a little bit on this specific change moment, it's important to understand it because the leadership required here is quite different to what it has been in the past. So these S curves, right at the beginning, essentially, we come up with a set of solutions to solve a set of problems that we've had. So take the Industrial Revolution, right? It was a set of solutions to deal with problems back then. The thing is that each set of solutions has the seeds of the next set of problems in it, right? Each set of solutions always has the seeds of the next set of problems. So you implement your solutions, everything seems to go well for a while, and then those seeds of the problems start to sprout, and you begin to see new problems emerging that you hadn't thought of before. And so the Industrial Revolution, you could say, has created a bunch of problems that we're now faced with, particularly around sustainability issues. So then the old system starts to break down as we realize it doesn't work anymore. And then under the radar, you get people starting to create new solutions and exploring what this future might look like. So it's what the systems thinkers in the middle here call a chaos point. A point where the old systems are breaking down and the new ones are trying to break through. Chaos actually means subtle order. So within the chaos, there is also the order of the new system that is starting to emerge. So this is the kind of change context within which we're trying to lead our organizations and societies at the moment. So all of these issues, right? Natural disasters, water, climate change, food, pandemics. I mean, this is a slide I've had for, I don't know, 10 years or something. And pandemics has always been there. Now we've got one, but doesn't mean any of the other issues have gone away. Like they're all still there and they're still all interlocking, and they're requiring a level of collaboration between people that we've not had before. So The question is, how do you take into account as much of the complexity as possible when you're faced with these situations? And the map that I have found very useful in this context is this integral map developed by an American philosopher called Ken Wilber, who's the most translated philosopher in the US at the moment, and he calls it integral theory. The reason he calls it integral theory is because what he did is he was convinced that all the different theories that were out there had a part of the truth, but never the whole truth. So he was interested in how do these different theories connect? What does that tell us about the whole picture? And this is kind of what emerged from it. He said, look, you've basically got four main perspectives from which you can look at the world. One dimension of that is what he calls the interior. So that what goes on in our inner worlds, as it were, that you can't see by just looking at somebody. You actually have to engage with them and talk to them, find out their motivations to know what's going on in their inner worlds. Then you've got the outer worlds, which we can see and measure. So our physical body, our organism, you can watch people's behavior, and collectively all the systems and structures and stuff around us. But at the collective level, the culture, the values that exist are not things that can be seen and measured from the outside, right? They're things that anthropologically you have to go and research and find out, what are those values? They're under the water in terms of the iceberg model, for example, that you can't see. So when we're dealing with this kind of complexity, we need to be taking all four of these aspects into account. Traditionally, in our kind of scientific, rational mindset, we only look at the exterior. So we look at behavior and we look at systems and structures. But you can't change people's behavior without understanding what is motivating them to behave in that way. So then you've got to get to the interior of the individual. What are the values that they hold? How do they see the world? What are their beliefs? Because that's what's influencing the way they behave. Likewise, if you try to change the structures of a society or an organization in its processes, but you don't work with the culture, then the culture will just create another way of doing things that fits the cultural values. It's easy to change a structure, but that doesn't mean people are actually going to follow that structure, because what's closer to them are the values and the culture that they're a part of. So you've got to take all four of these into account when you're looking at any situation. What are the motivations of the individual? What's their behavior? What are the collective values that they hold in their culture? And what are the systems and structures? And so any intervention that you make as a leader needs to take all four of these into account. Now, what we're going to look at now is how have we developed as humanity across these four domains over time? Because we've all had an evolutionary journey, and those have created value systems, ways of looking at the world that influence the choices that we make and influence how we see the world and influence how we behave. So if we're trying to get to a more sustainable behavior by people, we need to understand this interior side here. What are the deep codes that drive people to behave in certain ways so that we can meet people where they're at and create good reasons for them that fit their worldview for behaving more sustainably? So this is a kind of very big picture that we're going into first. This, you could say, is the development of life, of the universe over time. And the reason it's structured in this way is because, you can say the universe is the biggest context. And then within the universe, you've got the solar system and the lithosphere, blah, blah, blah. And then you've got human civilization that emerges as a subset of this bigger context. Now, the journey, so what we're going to do now is we're going to zoom into the yellow box here and see what this journey looks like for humanity as we go through it, and how it influences the way that we see the world and therefore the choices that we make. So this is based on a model called spiral dynamics, which was research done by a man called Clare Graves originally, which is quite, he was around at the same time as Maslow. So if you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they were around at the same time. But where Maslow said, you've got your pyramid and it stops at the top, Graves said, no, it keeps going. Development keeps going, because each time we create solutions, that creates new problems, adds complexity, and we need to move on again. And at the end of his lifetime, Maslow actually agreed with Graves that it was indeed an open system. So we're going to run through these very briefly, and then we're going to go and have a chance to discuss them, because understanding these worldviews is very important in learning to be able to meet people where they're at and give them reason to behave sustainably that fits their worldview. So the bottom level here, the beige, is simply survival. So same on Maslow's pyramid, you know, it's basically just getting enough to eat. And so we spent a long time just in this phase of our development as humanity, millions of years, you know. Once we basically learned to survive, what emerged next for us was a need for safety and belonging. So we started to band together in tribes to feel safer. And in that way of being, what was important were rituals that kept the old ways alive. And they were communicated not in written, but more orally. And we perceived the world as interconnected, but not cognitively, purely experientially. So we felt how everything was like the world was one big living organism, essentially, that was going on around us. So at that time, there was also a lot of magic in the sense of seeing influences on our lives that exist outside of just the material reality. Now, this was a strong collectivist system because being part of the tribe was very, very important. What happened next was that, and you know, I'm saying this in a very short period of time, but we kind of hung out for about 3 million years as hunter-gatherers in these beige and purple systems. So they deeply influenced who we are and how we developed. But what happened next is that we took a big step because we kind of broke out in a way of this collective system and started to see ourselves as individuals separate from each other, so that each individual had their own identity. We started to notice there's me and there's the other. And in psychological terms, it's the emergence of the ego, the sense of separate self, the experience of there being me and there being an other. Before that time, we never had that experience. Like it's like a child comes up when they're up to 2 or 3, they still believe they're one with the mother in terms of how they experience reality. It's only when they turn 3 and they start saying me, 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 that sense of me emerges. So collectively, that happened in this red phase. And that was the time that agriculture emerged. That was the time that linear thinking emerged. It was even the time that linear time emerged. Before then, we didn't experience time in a linear way. And so what was important at this red level was self-expression, respect for each other, being the strongest, getting to the top of the pile, as it were. And you see this a lot, for example, in street gangs and things nowadays. So all of these value systems, they still exist in people nowadays because they're the journey that we've taken. Now, after that red system emerges, because that creates quite a lot of chaos collectively. And so what happens next is that we try to create order. So we move back to a more collective system and we try to create an ordered way of seeing the world. And this was, and what's important in this value system is a hierarchy of the boss at the top or the god at the top, knowing your place in the order of things, following the rules. So this is what you see when this is where the religions emerged, for example, and created this strong hierarchy of priests and things in the system. And it's still a very strong system in a lot of the world. And in, for example, the military, in the in the help services and things like the ambulance and the fire brigade. It's important because people just need to know what the rules are, get on and do it, and don't discuss it because they need to act quickly. So that blue system really put a lot of order in place, and it's when the nation state emerged as well. Out of that, we needed to get more individual expression again. And that's where the whole scientific, rational mindset emerged that is so dominant, particularly in Western civilization, where we stopped believing in what the priest or the boss was telling us, and we wanted to go and look into it ourselves and check whether it added up. Was this true? You know, what they were saying. And so that's where science emerges, and we start to explore the world from a scientific perspective, all focused from those quadrants really on the exterior side, trying to analyze things and understand them. It was also all about progress, being the best at things, knowing the most. And it kind of emerged around the time of the Industrial Revolution and the free market economy as well, which was all about liberating the individual to be who they could be and make as much money as they can and get to the top and all of that kind of stuff. Now, that starts to run out of steam for people at some point because they realize there's more to life than just knowing more and being better at stuff. They become more aware of their feelings. They become more interested in the environment. They think more about the impact of their activities on other people. And that's when this green pluralistic system emerges. That's really the kind of postmodern way of seeing things, where it's an understanding of respecting everybody, trying to create space for everybody, giving everybody a voice. It's driven by harmony. It intrinsically wants to look after other people and look after the planet. So sustainability is a very natural thing for value systems from green and up. Okay, and we'll come to how we deal with the others in a sec. Now, what happens after that one, this integral level, is a kind of a realization that, well, it's all very good to feel harmonious with each other, but we need to design solutions that take into account as much of reality as possible. And so the integral perspective looks at all the different pieces, like systems thinking and stuff that you've been exploring, and works out how do we connect up the dots, take into account as many things as possible so that we can create integral solutions to the challenges that we're facing. And then finally, just to touch briefly on turquoise, turquoise sees things from the perspective of the whole and actually starts to understand life as an interlocking web of energies and realizes that there is more to life than just the physical aspects that we can see. And then you see things like quantum physics starting to show us how our intention and our consciousness influences the world around us. So I'm not going to go into that one for too much time unless you want to come back to it later. But it's much more of an intuitive system than a cognitive system. Yellow is really the last kind of system where the cognition dominates. So each of these value systems exist in all of us, depending on how far they have developed in us. And we need to understand how to communicate to people who have these different value systems. So for example, for red, if you wanted to communicate sustainability, you'd use, say, a top sports star or a top martial arts guy or someone who represents kind of power and strength, who gains a lot of respect from their followers, because people are going, if that person says, be sustainable or whatever, then people will respect what they say, people who resonate with the red value system. With the blue value system, you need to find the people who are at the top of the hierarchies to communicate to their followers. So in a church, for example, you want the priest to say, if you take the Christian tradition, in the Bible, it says you have to look after the earth. Okay, they're gonna believe that language, people who have access to blue. In orange, you want to be able to show how the science is proving that we need to be more sustainable, as well as showing how a Tesla is a really cool car And if you do, it'll boost your status, because orange is also interested in progress. Or if you put solar panels on your roof, it shows that you're really ahead of the game in terms of science and progress. So orange needs that. Green, as I said, intrinsically will do what it can to look after the earth. So you need to communicate with integrity and authenticity to green, or else they don't believe you. So green doesn't believe any of the advertising and stuff out there. It really follows its kind of more feeling sense of things. Yellow is very functional. So yellow will want to know, what are we going to do and how are we going to do it? Let's get on with it. And turquoise will be more intuitive in its relationship. But in terms of where the mass of humanity is, and this is what these white lines are illustrating, really we need to focus on communicating sustainability to blue and orange, because that's where the bulk of humanity is. So we need to find ways of communicating that resonate with those value systems. See it again. So your question was about the yellow integral value system, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good one, because that is, that's the kind of thinking, in a way, the yellow thinking is what's needed to deal with the complexity that we're facing at the moment. And what drives yellow is solutions to solve the complex challenges that we're facing. So that's its motivation. They found in the research that there was a big leap from the first 6 systems, beige to green, up to yellow, in terms of problem-solving capacity. So yellow was much more effective at solving problems because it was willing to view things from many different perspectives. See, those first 6 value systems all are fairly attached to their own perspective. Right, so green believes everybody should be nice, harmonious to each other. Orange believes, no, it's all about science and getting to the top. Blue believes in their own one truth religion or belief system. Red believes in fighting to get to the top. So they're all attached to their own perspective. Yellow is the first one that can take a distance from its own worldview, right, and then can see that they all have their role. So it's not judging the other worldviews. It's saying, these are just perspectives people have, and we need to understand them to be able to meet people where they are and help them make, positive decisions, essentially. Does that, does that make sense?
Yeah, more than.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I have a question. So, yeah, here. So how it won't lead to like a chaos, because if everyone will have something of their own and people will be disagreeing, right? So basically all these 6, what you're talking about, they help us kind of achieve one thing altogether, that people actually don't kill each other by just taking something that they want.
Yep.
So if it's just really confusing to me how we can make it work, because even if I look outside the box, it makes me only people will become, because people are kind of cruel and their ego is so big, they want to take what they actually think they want, right? And this power gods and mythic aura keeps us a little bit in order. So okay, this is what you want, but for society it will be beneficial if we look this way, and for your kids in the future it will be beneficial if we do this right now. So how you think that yellow can be maybe manipulated a little bit, or people won't use that against each other?
Yeah, it's a great question. And exactly what you said, the reason there's so much chaos in the world at the moment is that all of these value systems are fighting with each other within value systems and across the value systems. So the chaos is what yellow thrives on. Yellow loves the challenge of trying to create some order in this chaos around the question of solving the big challenges that we're facing. So what you have to do is you first of all have to suspend judgment on the value systems themselves, right? We can't say red is bad, blue is bad. They're not, and there's no bad value systems, right? These are coping mechanisms They are ways that emerge in us to cope with our reality. So you can't say they're good or bad. That's really important. The question always is how fit is a value system to the life conditions? So is blue, for example, able to solve the complexity of the problems we're facing at the moment? No, right? So what we're saying is that it's the yellow complexity is needed to solve these problems. But the problem is, as we're all seeing, is that the bulk of the world's population is hanging out at red and blue, and the dominant systems have come out of orange, right? The kind of free market capitalist system and representative democracies. So the question is, how do you meet people where they are in those value systems and create messaging that respects who they are in terms of their developmental journey, but creates content that we know is needed to be able to, create a better world? So like I was saying, what are the hot buttons for red? Well, for red to do something, it's got to be cool, right? It can't be, and it needs to be something that kind of which makes them feel proud, as it were. It's got to have that kind of, it can't be, oh, do it because your mummy says you should do it. That's just not going to work for red, right? Red's got to feel, okay, this means my mates are going to look at me with respect, right? If I do this. So with blue, the tricky with blue is that there are different communities, as it were, in the blue value system. So all the religions essentially come out of the blue value system. They have their one truth, right? And the problem is that they all fight each other. Say, my one truth is the right truth. No, my one truth is the right truth. No, it's not. I'm going to kill you for that. Boom. And the point is that I think what I've seen anyway is that underneath all the religions, there seems to be the same story, but the cultures have created different versions of it, essentially, and then they start fighting each other over it. So what you need to do is you need to find the people in those blue groups who can see beyond the boundaries of their own one truth, but who are still have kind of still high up in the hierarchy, so that if they say something, people will follow what they say. But of course, the language that, let's say, the Pope will use for the Roman Catholic community will be different to what an imam will use in their community. So you've got to help them customize the message, as it were, to fit their community. So it's about finding the leaders for blue, finding the leaders at the top of these communities who, if they say something, people will do it just because they said it, essentially, that they'll follow the rules, right? Now, in a lot of Western society, people won't do that anymore, particularly in the Netherlands. This is a classic country of people who don't like following the rules, right? It's like, oh, I'll do my own thing. What are you saying? And so then you've got to find a different form. So you've got a lot of orange. If we go to orange, it's got to be exciting. It's got to be like, on the leading edge of things. It's got to be backed up by science. So that the way so to come back to Kirill, your question, it's what we call from yellow a meshwork. And a meshwork is actually what the brain does when it needs to perform a certain function. It connects up all sorts of bits so that it can do something. Well, from yellow, your job is to meshwork the different value systems to work together towards an overarching goal. Okay, but they don't need to know they're working together. So when somebody talked about manipulation, yellow wouldn't see it as manipulation. It would see it as smart design that's basically for the good of the whole. So yellow's always looking for the good of the whole. What do we need to do to solve these big challenges? But it does it without judgment on people. That's the key thing, right? By trying to deeply understand, why do people behave in certain ways, and how do we help them change that behavior without having to change the person, right? So we're not trying to get everybody to the top of the spiral. Okay, to the top of, we're not trying to get everybody to yellow, because that's mission impossible anyway. What we're trying to do is create the habitats or the solutions that will fit the different value systems and their contexts. Does that make sense?
And how we can make sure that that yellow who integral, I mean, who creating solutions to solve the complex, challenges. How we can be sure that it is the right one, because
The right solution.
It might come from the self as well, or from it as well. So there is a difference, I guess.
Well, how do you, yellow's kind of in a way response to that is, well, you'll know if it's the right solution if it works. So what yellow would try to do is create the, do you know this concept of minimal viable product in kind of entrepreneurship? The smallest version of the solution possible to be able to test it out and get feedback. Right, so it won't just try to come up with something and then roll it out everywhere. It will evolve it iteratively. It'll test something, get the feedback, adapt it, do the next, test it again. And so it'll keep moving in micro feedback cycles as quickly as possible, because yellow just wants to find the solution that works. It's not attached, and from yellow, you're not attached to your own idea. That's really important. So yellow's like, oh, but it's my idea, so it really should work. No, who cares? What yellow cares about is, does it work? So the question is, how do you get feedback on whether it works or not? All right, so it'll design, like in systems thinking, it'll design the feedback and learning loops, and then it'll iterate again. It'll develop it always in context, right? So not just abstractly, but really apply it to the context and try it out. Yeah.
Can you give a concrete example, Peter, on how this could work?
I have a question. I have a massive question. Can I please? Sorry. I'm so sorry. I have such a huge question. I guess it's up on my mind for like 5 minutes.
Okay, just go ahead, Kuro. I can see you sit on the tip of your chair.
All right. So if we're talking about the yellow, right? We will, for example, it's like kind of what I understand what you're suggesting. We make kind of the powerful lead of the people from different countries, from different cultural backgrounds, with different perspective, with different gender, like all different from every country, and we bring them all together so they can decide some complexest issue of the whole world.
No, that's not what I'm suggesting anyway. But is this your proposal?
Like what are you suggesting though? Like
you see,
like that's what are you suggesting?
You can't. This is the kind of part of the illusion that Green gets stuck in. You can't sit all of these people around a table and expect them to agree, because they won't. Okay. So what you have to do is you have to design the solutions that they will naturally adopt, because it fits their value system and it fits their cultural context. So it's not about getting everybody around the table to agree on things. It's about getting everybody to do things that are good for people and planet. And the only way to do that is to understand what their deep motivations are. Why would they want to do that? Well, the value systems gives one perspective on that, right? And of course, these value systems play out differently in different cultures. So the distinction to make is think of these value systems as underlying codes, okay? And then on top of the codes, you have all sorts of content, right, that comes out of the value systems. And that content is different for different cultures. Like let's take religions, right? So you've got an underlying code of blue, but you've got Christian content, Islamic content, Buddhist content, all different stories that come from the same underlying perspective. And so you've got to craft the solutions and the messaging to resonate with those perspectives. But it's not about trying to get everybody to agree, because they never will. That's what Green tries to do. Okay, Green tries to sit everybody around a table, get them all to talk about it and share their feelings, and think that that will solve the problem. Yeah, which is,
so it will solve like kind of the global problem for everyone, right? Like kind of like help everyone be kind of a little bit equal. But the problem is I want to be equal.
not about being equal,
but
it's about
like
being
same
treated.
solution for everyone. Like to have the same solution, you have to follow kind of a little bit of the different, but there's kind of the same order that will lead to one kind of result, right? But
Yeah,
if it leads to result, that people start thinking, okay, so we're gonna be like these, so we're gonna be like these, so we're kind of gonna be the same, and like what everyone wants, they kind of want to be the same, yeah, but they kind of want to be slightly different.
yeah, they
So
wouldn't
when
be
we
the same.
like,
No.
what?
They wouldn't be the same. That's the thing. That they may all end up, but if we do our job right, they will end up all behaving in a sustainable way. So at that level, it's the same, right? But how they do that will be completely different in terms of their value system and their cultural context. So the exact solutions. That's why participation and engagement of people when you're trying to create solutions, and ownership by them of their solution, and involving them in the design process is really important, because there's no way we can understand the complexity of all these different people in these different contexts. So you've got one goal, which is, let's say, a sustainable planet. That doesn't mean that everybody then becomes the same, right? They have different ways of contributing to that sustainable planet.
But what if it was just one person who will say, okay, I put in more effort than he does,
Yeah.
and I put in more effort than he does, but like we're different, and we're all looking for the same, like we're looking for the same solution.
Yeah.
But like you don't see, like maybe it will be like just the people will start thinking that's it's kind of even a little bit manipulating them, but sort of different way.
Yeah,
And they'll just say,
you're trying
all
to
right.
meet, basically, if you do it well, then you're increasing their happiness because you're meeting them where they're at. They're feeling seen and understood, right? Often what happens is our governments come with a solution that's way too complex for people, right, to implement, and they don't feel seen, they don't feel heard, right? And so you get kind of frustration with politics because it's way too, politics in the Netherlands is very kind of green, with a bit of yellow, let's say. And so the people who kind of are hanging out around red and blue don't feel that they're being represented, right? Which is why you get a Geert Wilders and those kind of people showing up, because they do give voice to those value systems. So the trick is to be able to really meet people where they're at, and help them to come up with solutions that fit their context, essentially.
All right,
and it is a
makes
big
sense.
challenge, Kirill. I'm nobody's saying this is easy, right? But when you've got a map of the landscape like this, it becomes easier to navigate the landscape.
I think Saxi is raising her hand.
Sure.
My question was that, so as long as there's a yellow, there's gonna be a blue.
Yes.
Somewhere.
So it's from the bottom up, they build on each other.
But from the previous class, we've been talking about connections with each other, and I think that doesn't it stack up, like you said from the previous slide, that one day there's the blue, light blue, turquoise, yellow is gonna be down, and then purple is gonna come back up, and that it's all gonna be about survival and saving the ethnicity, then talking about the integral part.
Why? So you saying, first let's get a concept, right? So basically it's like just stages of growth that we go through. And so if you've got orange in yourself, then you've also got beige, purple, red, and blue. Yeah, they're just the building blocks, as it were, to get there. And so each new level transcends, but includes the previous level. Yeah, And that's why it becomes ever more complex. You're able to deal with more complexity the more levels you go up, because you've got the earlier ones you still have in you. Yeah. Now, sometimes what happens is that when we do a development from one stage to another one, it's a bit of a traumatic development, and we may kind of fight against the past, as it were, and push it away. And then then we have a problem with that earlier value system, because for some reason in the transition, then you've got to try to reintegrate it and things.
But there's no way of going back, is there?
Well, you can always think of them as like lights, like in your system, that you can always light up any of the earlier value systems that you've been in. So for example, you may be a really nice pluralistic person who can have a conversation, and share their emotions. But when you get on the sports field, you don't want to sit around and have a harmonious dialogue, right? You want to light up your power gods red and go and win the match, right? So and that it does exist in you, right? So you can, and the trick is to be able to, depending on the life conditions around you, light up the value system that's most appropriate, right? Let's say a fire breaks out in your house, okay? You don't want to sit around and have a dialogue about what the best thing to do is, do you? You want to follow the blue rules, go to the escape route, and get out. Yeah. And so that's why different value systems are more appropriate for different contexts. Yeah.
Can I also add something to this to put it a little bit into perspective? In what we have been doing in class. If you remember, like the iceberg, I've been using the iceberg model from Otto Scharmer as well. Yeah. And it really nicely fits on the mindset at the bottom of the iceberg. So we're creating certain systems. So if you depart from a blue mindset or a blue value system, you start creating systems that are very structured, where there's a lot of hierarchy, where there are rules, and very bureaucratic as well. And what I really liked in the sentence that you made, like every solution that we see. So it's good to have in a way, it's good to have a structured society, because then we know what we are up to, and we have rules. We know that we need to stop for the traffic light, and we know what happens if we don't, because that's all laid down in law and order. But it also, if we start putting everything into a system from that mindset, from that value system, we can already see how it narrows down our being a free human and being our innovation and creation into life, because we're so stuck in that system. And that is where you can see that if we have solutions to a certain problem, that is already the seeds for the next problem. So if we put everything in law and order, which we do in some countries still, and then we also see like how it actually narrows down the freedom and the freedom of thinking and the creation power of people. And at one point, people want to break out of that again. And then we get into more of an orange mindset and start creating from systems from there that then create, if we now look around and see like the unsustainable behavior that it has been creating as well. So it has freed us. So it has set us into our creative power, but at the same time, we got so creative and we got so self-centered that it created a lot of side effects that we do not desire. And then already the next system starts to emerge. Yeah. And we still have those, as we have experienced that particular value system, it's still in us. We can't just take it out and put another piece of the puzzle into our being. So it's still inside of us. So we can still go back to that as well and tune into it. But with the next knowledge of being more concerned with our fellow humans, we may want to just take the autonomous orange in some places where it can be healthy, and not in other places where we want to take care of the relation, for example. Does that make sense a little bit in how you can also see it into the iceberg that we have been talking about before, Sakshi?
Yeah,
Yes.
when he said that Netherlands is more of a yellow and green, and it doesn't quite match up with the lower part, I went back to my country and I thought that we're still back in purple, because we're still stuck between China and India, and it's not about going back to yellow. It comes back to survival and which part we're going to choose.
Yep. And it's
So,
not about one being better or worse. Remember that. It's about, is it appropriate for the life conditions? So if you end up getting stranded on a desert island somewhere, you know, then you better have a good beige, or else you're in trouble, right?
yeah,
So
so
the
it
beige,
doesn't matter where you go up the tier, as long as
as long as it fits the
Okay.
context. It's fit for the context. That's the key. So on the desert island, there's no point in you starting up a business out of orange, right? You just need to kind of get your beige activated and maybe engage the spirits from purple, you know, and then you know, give you a chance of survival.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah. But that's a really important thing to get, you know, that it's not about one being better than the other. It's about their fit with the context. It just so happens that from a global perspective now, yellow is the best fit for the complexity of the challenges that we're facing. But that doesn't mean that we need to get everybody to yellow, because that'll never happen. People will always need to do things that kind of fit with blue. There'll always be accountants, you know, out of blue. There'll always be marketeers out of orange. There'll always be human resource people out of green, you know.
More questions or comments?
Do you just remember the 4 quadrants? That's important to remember as the foundation, so that those levels we just looked at, they express themselves through all 4 of these quadrants. Yeah. So you see the individual develops through the value systems, cultures do, we build systems and structures, and actually even our neurology and develops through these different levels in the kind of organism side. So when you start to look at it through the 4 quadrants, you begin to see why sometimes people are stressed in their work environment, let's say, because they might have a certain value system. Let's say they've got a strong green value system in the upper left quadrant here, the I self, but they're in an organizational culture that's strongly blue, right? Then that's going to create stress between the individual and the collective. Yeah, so the quadrant, looking at the quadrant through the perspectives. And you can see it is actually on this map here, where you've got on the left side the I, on the right side the it's, right, and then up the middle here the we, I, we, and it's.
Okay. Dennis is also raising his hand. Dennis?
So, Peter, I just want to know if the blue system was specifically created just to control the way people behave, like just to control the minds of people.
That's what, does blue want to do that? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, that's what I think. Because
yeah, you're right.
it limits people. Yeah.
You're right. Blue wants to basically take its one truth and get everybody to believe it. Right. But the thing is, there's all these different one truths, and they all think they're the only one truth. Right.
So
that's where you get into trouble.
So it's basically a dictatorship.
Yeah. So at blue, you know, you get a dictatorship. I wonder if I can, let me see if there's if we're going to get into this, an image that might also help. I didn't spell it rightly. But yeah, you can imagine, right, different leadership styles at different levels, right? So a different kind of leader would show up. Stratified democracy, that's right, that's what it was called, yeah. And therefore different governance systems, you know? Oh, there it is. Oh, just lost it again. I can't find it right now. I'll keep looking for it, but I have a slide, an image that basically shows, like you say, the different kind of governance systems. at the different levels of development. Oh, here we go. Yeah. 1 second. By the way, this is a big rabbit hole. Like if you get into this stuff, it can suck you in. So here is a kind of map again that shows, so if you look along here, let's say, I can highlight these. These are the different kinds of democracy, for example. So under blue, I think you were saying, right, is an authoritarian democracy. Right, is what you'd expect to emerge there, multi-party, social democracy, etc. Here you can see the different kind of economic systems, right? So in blue, it's the people who follow the rules, the just, get the rewards. So if you do what you're told, you'll go to heaven, if not, you'll go to hell. That's kind of blue, reward and punishment, essentially. Whereas orange is everybody tries to, make it for themselves. Green believes everybody should benefit equally. We should share it all around, basically. So you have more of a social democracy and things. Yeah, so you can see how our different ways of organizing ourselves evolve with the different value systems. The issue, as you can see here, is this big red bulge, right, in the graphic of human development. So how do you channel this red energy constructively to build a better world when ultimately it's kind of very ego-driven? That's a big design challenge. Is that I can share that. I can send a couple of things to Marion for her to share if you want to see, have this one.
Yeah, that would be nice. I can share it with the students. Yeah. Okay, more questions or comments or doubts?
Does it not make sense? Is there anybody who goes, I don't get this, doesn't make sense because X, Y, Z? Where do you, have you when you look at it, let me just put the value systems up. Where would you say you are on the value systems? Think about that for yourself. Which value systems are active in you, right? Which ones are there any that you really don't like? Like, are there any that you have an allergy to? It's worth thinking about, because you'll only be able to engage a value system effectively in the world if you've integrated it in a healthy way in yourself. Right. So if you have an allergy to blue, order, hierarchy, authority, then you won't be able to successfully engage blue systems in the world, because you'll continually be triggered by them and you'll be projecting your judgment onto them.
I'm just quickly putting them in a poll. I thought that's maybe nice.
In a what?
In a poll.
Oh, yeah. And let's, and remember, these aren't typologies. So it's not types of people. They're value systems that you use to cope with the world. So you never only ever have one value system active. You nearly always have two. What you might have noticed is that they're the warm colors. So yellow, orange, red, and beige are more individually focused. And the cool colors, purple, blue, green, turquoise, are more collective focused. Right, so we nearly always have one of each. We have like a favorite warm color and a favorite cool color. And don't forget, like we talked about earlier, you can always drop down the spiral to be able to. So can they only select one, Marion?
Yeah.
So why don't we go for now? What's your favorite to start with? Like, which is your favorite value? Which one do you feel most attracted to? And then we can do one on there.
So I have a question. So you just mentioned that cool colors, it's more collective rather than warm colors.
Yeah.
So yellow is a warm color. So
Yeah.
does it mean that, for example, as you mentioned before, it's like self. So yellow become from the self. It's not about the its. I mean, the who
Okay. I see what you
populations,
mean.
they will not worry about it, or it's totally different things.
Yeah, it's not. I think it's totally different things from what you're saying. So the
Because it makes confused.
yeah, the value systems express themselves through all four quadrants. Yeah.
Okay.
The yellow, it's you know, the polarity between the I and the we, the individual and the collective, becomes increasingly less as you get up the spiral. So yellow is still an express self system, as we call it, and because it'll take initiative itself, right? It really wants to kind of get out there and solve the problems. And one of yellow's traps is that it tries to do it too much on its own. Like, you know, even though it tries to like engineer everything and sort the problems out. And it gets very cognitive. It's like reaches its cognitive limit. But yeah, they're more about, so the warm colors are about expressing yourself, and the cool colors are about connecting to others more as the base tone. You can always say a yin and a yang, almost like the warm colors are more the yang and the cool colors are more the yin. So that's why they all kind of always play with each other. It's like a pendulum, you know, as well. We swing sometimes to more of the warm, and then we need more of the cool. You know, it feels a bit lonely on the I, so we go to get some more we. You know, it feels a bit suffocating on the we, so we try to express ourselves more. So it's always a dynamic between them. So as our poll got us green, orange, beige. Beige is in some places really important at the moment. Yeah. Interesting.
So what about the like third world countries? Like what's the like solution for them if we'll have equal, like not like solution to everyone? What they're gonna be solution for the countries like in Africa where like it's like limited their like natural resources and they have far less stuff than in other countries to give like to our planet.
Yeah.
Like knowledge, for example. It's not like the bad thing, but I'm just saying we're different. Like we're all different. But some of the people, like they cannot just give something back. And I think for this system to work, like you might need something in return, like every country and every nation and everyone have to like give something to return.
I think you're right. You know, so what's particularly important if you've got this big red kind of red-blue band coming is that the, you know, things like technology transfer are going to be really important. Like if some countries have developed sustainable technologies, then how do we get them implemented as quickly as possible in countries that have huge and growing populations? Because, you know, if we look from the whole, if we don't enable these countries to adopt sustainable technologies, then they're going to create not through a fault of their own, but they're just going to end up creating a big ecological footprint. And so the important, like you say, it's not in everybody's just a selfish interest. It's about understanding the perspective from the whole. So rather than having countries competing against each other or businesses competing against each other, we need to put kind of planetary survival, as it were, at the top of the agenda, and then do what we can to make sure that everybody has the technologies that they need. At the same time, you know, different cultures and different contexts will create, if they're given the opportunity, will create the technologies that best fit their context. So it's also about, you know, making sure we don't try to impose systems that may not work. Let me give you a quick example. I don't know how long we can go on for, Miriam, but after the, let's say when the wall fell, right, and the Soviet Union collapsed, the Soviet Union had a very strong blue communist system in place, right, that was like controlling everything. And when it collapsed, when the communism collapsed and the Berlin Wall came down, that blue system kind of disappeared. And what we did from the West is that we tried to drop a kind of free market, multi-party democracy into the Soviet Union to try to make them the same as us. So we dropped an orange system, right, onto what was actually a raw red context because the blue had disappeared. Yeah, so the blue structure of communism had gone. And then you got this kind of Wild West. So that's why a lot of the privatizations that happened in Russia after the wall came down actually were just corrupt former politicians who ended up buying out a lot of these businesses, essentially. So there wasn't a free market, right? And then you got a whole lot of corruption going on in the politics because there wasn't that blue order system for the orange to be able to rest on. You see? And so if you drop a technology or an approach that's come from a more complex place onto a less complex, then all sorts of stuff goes wrong. Let's even take nuclear weapons, you know, or latest technology that's been developed. You know, you can have very strong technological development, maybe coming out of, you know, orange, green, yellow, whatever. But that's kind of world-centric technology, you could say. But if that gets into the hand of ethnocentric warlords, right, then you have a problem because they've got very high impact technology, right? But their values, the morality, the moral development, let's say, is around red, purple. So that's part of the complexity that we face right now, is that there's all sorts of very high impact technologies out there knocking around, but there are still warlords running around, you know, who believe that their truth is the only truth and they need to kind of kill anybody who doesn't believe the same thing as they do. And if they get their hands on this technology, right, then we have a problem. So it's understanding the different, you know, so this is one of the mistakes we've made in development work from the West, is we just tried to drop our solutions onto cultural contexts that don't fit, right? And then, so we build a school or a hospital somewhere or something, and then nobody uses it because we've not understood, right? They don't have ownership of the solution, right? Because it doesn't fit the value system, it doesn't fit the context.
So, but like, okay, so what's the problem? Like, this doesn't work, but like how we can make it work? Because like the solution is right here to like give people opportunity to live better life, but don't force them to do that, but just like make their own choice. Like we know about our mistakes with like Afghanistan and Iraq, but we don't have to force people. When we force people, they start, okay, we don't like it, and everything's going wrong.
Yeah.
But how can we make sure when we gonna do something, we don't force people to be like us, but to people be better than they were yesterday for themselves?
Yeah.
Whose
Great.
decision is going to be, like, who will make this decision?
That's a great question. And you know, that's why people having ownership over the solutions that for their context is really, really important. So you can't force a solution onto people. You can create a process that enables them to come up with solutions themselves that they then feel ownership over and that fits their context. So that's the challenge, is to hold the end goal in mind and then work out how do we create ways for people to come up with the solutions that that fit their context, essentially. So that's kind of, you know, what is it called? PAR, participatory action research. And there's all these approaches out there that are designed to engage people on the ground so that they're part of creating the solutions, right? Not just a top-down process. And that may feel like it's a longer process, but then the solutions stick, right? Otherwise they don't stick. Sorry, you were going to say?
Yeah, Saksi also raised her hand, and I think that's the last question because it's about to be 12 o'clock. So I think we need a break as well. So Saksi, your last question.
What I was gonna say is, I think it depends on what part of the world you're talking about, because in some places you need to force people. Like they have been brainwashed and following a certain part of um, a system that in order to change, they need to be forced to do something. So I think it depends on where the part you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, that may be the kind of solution, like in a context where there's a very strong blue, let's say, and people are kind of used to things being done for them by government or the authority or whatever, you know, in a way that makes it easier. Like the only hope I have for China, for example, is that it's such an authoritarian state that if they decide to go sustainable, they'll just force it through the country, right? And that's kind of what we need. The problem in a multi-party democracy is everybody has to debate it and discuss it, and some don't agree and they try to make their point, you know, nothing ever gets done. So you're right, there may be very much contexts where it's appropriate for a decision just to be taken and boom, to be implemented. And that's what will make people happiest because they're used to just following the rules.
Yeah, because there's always going to be somebody who's going to disagree with you.
Yeah.
If you're going to start listening to everybody, then how is it possible that it's going to be a order in a way?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
But like, I think that forcing people, it's not solution, because like, as the story tells us, when we force someone, they usually say, I don't disagree. And people just, like, from the different perspectives of their life, with culture we cannot fully understand, because we never lived there, we never experienced, our family didn't live there. We cannot force them to be different because it's not who they are. And when we do that, bad things happen,
That's why I think what we're suggesting is that it depends on the value system, right? If people are living and are used to living in a very blue context and they respect the leader, then the leader kind of takes a decision and they're happy to follow, right? In an orange context, that wouldn't work, you know, like you say, or a green is a real allergy to hierarchy like that. So they need to feel involved. Yeah, orange needs proof that it's going to work by an objective outside authority, right? That it's been researched and proven, and you can, you know, all that kind of stuff. So it's about just adopting these lenses. They're really, these value systems are lenses that help us to understand people better, and therefore to be able to respect where they are in their own development and help find solutions that fit, essentially.
So this will be definitely different solutions for different part of the world.
Absolutely. Whereas you're holding the end goal in mind, right? But then different solutions, different contexts, yeah. Different communication strategies, different implementation strategies. Yeah. That's a mesh work, right? Weaving together the different kinds of approaches aligned with the value systems. Yeah.
So it also requires that we go in dialogue with people,
yeah,
on what they really need. And we face our own trust in others. Like if I go in dialogue with somebody and somebody says what they really need, can I just build on that? Can I believe that? Or, you know, what's then my value system that comes in the way as well? To truly design solutions that are fit for a certain context.
Yeah. You're welcome. Can I leave people with one last little quote here? That I think is I really like anyway. Let me so how to prevent world catastrophe. This is what you all want to know, right? How to prevent world catastrophe. 1, admit it could happen. So we have to first accept that if we could screw up badly here. 2, decide it will not happen. And 3, commit your vision and energy to number 2 without ever forgetting number 1. I like the fact that the book is called Common Sense, because that's common sense. So good luck, guys. We need you all. So good luck with your program and whatever you're going to do with it afterwards.